Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Paleo 101. Today, I'm going to be giving a Zoom presentation. I gave this presentation at the Fernbank Science Center in early February, but the audio wasn't really that great. So I decided to do it here. And we're going to be going through at least 500 million years of the state's paleontological history. So in order to talk about fossils from the state of Georgia, we have to really figure out where can we find fossils from the state and where are those locations of sedimentary rocks and sediments can be located. Well, today we are located in the Piedmont region, and the Piedmont region is composed of igneous and metamorphic rocks, too old and not the type of rocks for fossils. In order to find fossils, you would need to go to Northwest Georgia, specifically from the Appalachian Plateau and the Valley of the Ridge. This is actually where we find some of our oldest known fossils like trilobites and sponges and corals and even plant fossils found from the Pennsylvanian period. This is where we're going to find our oldest known fossils, and it's actually where I work the most in, are the fossils discovered in the Appalachian Plateau and the Valley of the Ridge. South Georgia, over along Columbus and Macon, is what we call the fall line. The fall line actually represents a geological boundary between old igneous metamorphic rocks from the Piedmont region down to the South Georgia region, where we actually have our Cretaceous sediments and more of our younger type of sediments that were deposited after the age of dinosaurs. Along the Columbus region is where we find our Cretaceous sediments. So you can find a variety of different types of Cretaceous fossils like mollusks, and even dinosaur fossils have been found. And some of our younger fossils include mastodons, mammoth, and a variety of different types of marine invertebrates can be discovered from the fall line region. And this is where we find some of our youngest sediments and our youngest fossils. So let's sit back and relax because we're going to travel back over 500 million years through geologic history and learn about the state's paleontological history and its fossils. So the Cambrian period ranged from around 542 to 497 million years ago. This is when Georgia was positioned south of the equator. And we have a variety of different types of depositional environments that were being formed when Georgia was under a shallow ancient sea. And this included a variety of different types of tidal deposits. You had carbonates that included limestones and dolostones being deposited. And this was more of a tropical type of sea that animals and things of that nature were swimming around, and they were burrowing into the sediments, leaving traces in the rocks that we now know as belonging to Northwest Georgia. So the Cambrian period was an extremely important time period in Earth's history. You had various different animals that were arising in that time. And one of the reasons why the Cambrian period was so important was because of this new mechanism called biomineralization. And this simply means that animals were creating hard parts. This is where we start to see hard parts. So some of the very first abundant hard parts in their history. And so animals were secreting hard skeletons for protection. And they were making a variety of different types of shells, such as trilobites. And that's exactly what trilobites were doing. And so we see a variety of this types of mechanism as we first start to approach the Cambrian period. Some of the very first fossils discovered in Georgia are archaeocyathids, and these date back to around 516 million years ago and belong to a formation called the Shady Dolomite. Archaeocyathids are believed to have been ancient sponges, and these sponges were actually some of the very first reef building systems in the Cambrian period. And so there are some rocks that you can find in Northwest Georgia and even better places along California and Nevada that are completely composed of calcium carbonate exoskeletons of archaeocyatid sponges. These are actually some of the very first reef builders and some of the oldest fossils discovered in the state of Georgia. So we get to a formation called the Rome Formation, which also dates back to the early Cambrian, around 516 to 515 million years ago. And this was discovered, or these particular sedimentary deposits were likely from a tidal deposit. We see ripple marks, and we see mud cracks that indicate that the water was actually quite shallow. And you had tidal deposits that were basically, you had these tidal environments that were inside of the Rome Formation. So this indicates that the water level was actually quite low. And mud cracks are actually formed by the drying of mud based upon the sun. And so this lets us know that the Rome Formation, or parts of the Rome Formation, was a tidal deposit. The Cenozoic Formation dates back to around 505 to 497 million years ago. And this is actually the formation in Northwest Georgia and other places around like Alabama that we actually have abundant fossils in. So these fossils include some of my very favorite fossils, like trilobites. Trilobites are now extinct. They're an extinct group of arthropods, and we find abundant trilobite fossils within the Cenozoic Formation. We find a variety of different types of species, and they were actually very common in the shales that were being deposited in the Cenozoic Formation. You had a variety of different types of other organisms, including soft-bodied material discovered in the Cenozoic Formation, including the soft-bodied parts of sponges and other different types of shelly marine animals. The Knox group dates back to around 597 million years ago, and it's part of the late Cambrian system. And we can find stromatolites. Those stromatolites are actually cyanobacteria. The bacteria is long gone, but we can actually see the traces of their growth being found in chert and other different types of rocks found in the Knox group and the Copper Ridge dolomite. And so this was likely a tidal deposit because stromatolites need the sunlight to grow. And as the stromatolites grew, they would actually grow upwards where they could reach the sunlight. And their growth is actually preserved in the cherts that are found in Adairsville, Georgia. That's still Northwest Georgia, right next up to the Tennessee-Georgia borderline. So the Ordovician period is also a very important period in Earth's history. It's another important geological time period that we actually start to see high diversification. The diversification levels of animals started to expand. And the Ordovician period in Georgia was still under a shallow sea, still south of the equator. And the Iapetus Ocean, which existed in the Cambrian period, started to close. Large expanse of life occurred, and various different animals started to bloom. We call this the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. And you had a variety of different types of animals, such as brachiopods and corals, that started to diversify in the Ordovician. And the deposition of the Ordovician sediments included such as the Chickamauga limestone and the Squatchy Formation. This kind of gives you an example of likely what the Ordovician shallow seas would look like. You would have had a variety of different types of animals living, including nautiloid cephalopods, which were the apex predators of the Ordovician, crinoids, brachiopods, horn corals, and even the occasional trilobites could be found. So this particular fossil is found in the Chickamauga limestone. And that little fan type structure that you actually see is an animal called a bryozoan. Bryozoans are very common type of fossils that you can find in the Paleozoic type rocks. They still occur today, but they're not as diverse as they were in the Paleozoic era. But bryozoans are what we call moss animals, and those tiny little windows is where those animals would have lived in. Those windows are called zooecium. They were tiny little filter-feeding animals that were living in basically a large colony. And actually, bryozoans are actually closely related to brachiopods because of that, because of a feeding system that they have. And speaking of brachiopods, this is also a large slab of limestone. And in that slab is just hundreds of various different brachiopod fossils. And so we'll be talking about brachiopods a lot in this presentation as we start to go into the Paleozoic era. So during the Ordovician period, a volcanic arch collided within North America and deposited volcanic ash. There were large volcanic eruptions that would have happened in the Ordovician. And that volcanic ash eroded and transformed into a material called bentonite. And we can actually see bentonite beds between shales and limestones in Northwest Georgia along Ringgold, Georgia. A variety of different types of fossils can be found in the Ordovician, including some trace fossils as well, animals that were leaving their traces behind in the rock record. And here you have a slab of limestone. These were likely tidal deposits of worm burrows, and there was even a starfish resting place discovered within the Squatchy Formation. This is a crinoid calyx, the upper portion of a crinoid. Crinoids are echinoderms. Some of them would have been attached by a long stalk, and that stalk was accumulated by various different ossicles and columnals, and it basically made the body of the animal. And so this is actually a rare find. This is an Ordovician crinoid discovered in Ringgold, Georgia. The Silurian period in Earth's history looked quite similar, and the fauna of the Silurian period looked quite similar to the stuff that can be found in the Ordovician. So this is kind of what the oceans likely would have looked like in the Ordovician, or, I'm sorry, in the Silurian period. So we find a variety of different types of organisms. This is from a formation called the Red Mountain Formation, which was deposited in the lower portion of the Ordovician, somewhere between 440 million years ago. And you have a variety of different types of organisms, including brachiopods, lamp-shelled organisms, corals, and even trilobites. This here is a dalmatited trilobite discovered from the Red Mountain Formation by Bill Montante in Trenton, Georgia. The Devonian period, we didn't have too many depositional environments in the Devonian period. You had the Chattanooga Shale in the Ermuchi Chert, and there were other sandstones and things like that being deposited. We don't really find too many fossils from the Devonian period. We typically find small lingulate brachiopods, but that's pretty much it. You don't find abundant fossils in the Devonian, Chattanooga Shale, and Ermuchi Chert. But when we start to go into the Carboniferous period, we start to see an abundance of fossils coming back into the fossil record. So during the lower portion of the Carboniferous, Georgia was covered under a warm, shallow sea. And we have a high deposition of carbonates like limestones. During the early to late Carboniferous, Georgia was actually part of a deltaic swamp. And this is where we start to see the beginnings of Pangea starting to form. So lower Carboniferous fossils, known as the Mississippian subperiod of the Carboniferous, included a variety of different types of marine animals, including mollusks, cephalopods, but also you have a variety of different types of sponges being found. This was me and a University of West Georgia student from the University of West Georgia Geology Department, and I collecting sponge fossils from the lavender shell of the Fort Payne Formation. And other organisms included brachiopods, specifically these winged brachiopods, which made a really big comeback in the Mississippian subperiod of the Carboniferous. They started to diversify in the Devonian, but these specific, what we call angel-winged brachiopods, diversified in the Carboniferous period. Variety of different types of corals. These are horn corals. On the left are small rugose corals collected from the Floyd Shale of Rome, Georgia. And this is a colonial rugose coral, likely Actinocyathus, being discovered or found within the Carboniferous Mississippian H rocks of Ringgold, Georgia. And wait a minute, so you're wondering, I've talked about so many different types of invertebrate fossils, but where are the vertebrate animals? Where are the vertebrate fossils? And so one fossil that was discovered about, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, was a tooth from a chondrichthyan. So these are cartilaginous fish that include sharks and rays. And this was a tooth discovered in Rome, Georgia, from the Fort Payne Formation within the Lavender Shale member. And this is a tooth from a shark, from a chondrichthyan. And this is one of the oldest known chondrichthyan fossils discovered in the state of Georgia. And there is a recent paper that will be published on this very soon. The Upper Carboniferous, known as the Pennsylvanian, included a variety of different types of plant fossils. So we have on the left a lepidodendron section. Lepidodendron was what we call a scale tree or a lycopod, which could grow up to around 100 feet tall. And it would have also had very large and long roots called sigmoria, which is the root system that belongs to lepidodendron. And you had a variety of different types of ferns. These are found in Durham, Georgia, from the Crab Orchard Mountain Formation, which dates back to the lower Pennsylvania. Cool thing we also have are trace fossils, which include amphibian and reptile tracks. A very famous site in Alabama from Walker County called the Stephen C. Minkin Fossil Site has an abundance of these fossils. And in Chattooga County, Georgia, we also do have amphibian tracks. The same types of fossils that can be found at the Stephen C. Minkin site in Alabama. So we have no Permian fossils or no Permian rocks. We don't even really have Triassic or Jurassic fossils either. What we do have are drill cores that were taken from the coastal plains that are composed of red sandstones and conglomerates that were being deposited in these late Triassic, early Jurassic rift basins. So in the Piedmont region, you can also find these diabase intrusions that were being deposited or that were being formed by a failed rift system, which eventually created the Atlantic Ocean. But you also had a failed rift system during the early Jurassic to late Triassic to early Jurassic. So the Cretaceous period, we are now in the Mesozoic era, the age of reptiles, or also known as the age of dinosaurs. This is where we start to see our very first coastal sediments being formed at this time. There were abundant fossils that were being found in these Cretaceous sediments, which included the Utah Formation, the Cuseta Sand, the Blufftown Formation, the Ripley Formation, and the Providence Sand. These are all formations that were being deposited in these ancient seas during the latest part of the Cretaceous period. And you also had dinosaurs and large alligatorid type animals living off the coast of Georgia. So this is what on the left is a photo of North America, what it would have looked like during the late Cretaceous period. North America would have been cut by a shallow sea called the Western Interior Seaway. And on the left, you had Laramidia, which is the western part of the United States. And on the right, you had a continent known as Appalachia, which is where Georgia and all the other southern continents are, all the other southern states are. So this is what Georgia likely would have looked like during the Cretaceous period. You would have had a variety of different types of mollusks. But you also would have had a variety of different types of marine reptiles like mosasaurs. You would have had large sea turtles and plesiosaurs and large bony fish living at that time. But the most common fossils that you typically find are the invertebrates. You can find things like Exogyra, which is a large oyster that would have lived on the bottom of the sea floor. It would have opened and closed its shell for feeding. And so I recently went on a trip to collect Cretaceous fossils and found a variety of different types of invertebrate animals. And actually below the Exogyra shell is actually the green line that marks the Cretaceous sediments or the outcroppings of Cretaceous sediments that you can find in southern Georgia. So this includes a variety of different types of Cretaceous fossils. You have ammonites, relatives of squids and cuttlefish that can be found. This one is called Plecentoceras, and this one was discovered in the Blufftown Formation. You had a variety of different types of sharks and bony fish being found in some of the Cretaceous sediments, including sharks like Scapanorhynchus or the goblin shark. You would have also had Xiphactinus, a large bony fish, famously known from the Cretaceous rocks of Kansas. Now, we do have dinosaur fossils, but we don't have complete dinosaur fossils being discovered in the state. Most of the dinosaur fossils, in fact, all the dinosaur fossils in the state of Georgia are isolated bits and pieces of bone. We have theropod material, and we have mostly herbivorous dinosaur material like Hadrosaurus. We have ancient relatives of Tyrannosaurus rex known as Appalachiosaurus. This is the fourth metatarsal of an Appalachiosaurus discovered in the Blufftown Formation in Stewart County, Georgia. This is a recent dinosaur fossil found in Stewart County near Lumpkin, Georgia, of a large tibia from a hadrosaur. In fact, this is likely the youngest hadrosaur fossil discovered in the state of Georgia. And you would have also had other theropod material, including an Ornithomimosaurus. These casts are actually from Mississippi, but some very similar fossils can be and have been found in the Utah Formation in the southern or southwest Georgia region. Deinosuchus was likely the apex predator at the time. Deinosuchus fossils have been discovered in the state of Georgia as well as other places. Some of the largest specimens that we know of belong to Deinosuchus riograndensis, which belongs to fossils from Texas. But like Georgia has some of the oldest known fossils of Deinosuchus, dating back to likely from the Santonian or the Campanian stage, which was around 85 to 81 million years ago. Deinosuchus was a large alligatorid type animal that would have eaten dinosaurs. We do have evidence of basically fossils from New Jersey of Deinosuchus bite traces on the bones of dinosaurs. Deinosuchus remains have been found, including skull material and teeth. Teeth and scutes are probably one of the more common type fossils that you can find of Deinosuchus. So, of course, the story goes that around 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Gulf of Mexico and basically killed off everything in its path. It made a large mass extinction that we call the Cretaceous Paleogene mass extinction event. And we actually do have that record in the state of Georgia. The Providence sand was deposited at the very end of the late Cretaceous. And after the end of the late Cretaceous, you had another formation that was being deposited on top called the Clayton Formation. I recently went to the Providence Canyon State Park near Lumpkin, Georgia, and got to see this boundary between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene, now called the KT boundary or the KPG boundary, the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. And this kind of gives us an understanding that fossils from the latest part of the Cretaceous were way, way much different from the Clayton Formation. I did more of the collecting in Mississippi, where there was the Prairie Bluff chalk, which was deposited around the same time as the Providence sand. And I also got to see and collected fossils from the Clayton Formation. This was in Starkville, Mississippi. So after the extinction of dinosaurs around 66 million years ago, you had a different change in fauna. And you had a variety of different types of invertebrates that were living in some of the ancient seas that the Clayton Formation held. So now we get into the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals after the age of dinosaurs. You had a variety of different types of invertebrates and vertebrates living in some ancient seas. And you had what I believe should be the state fossil, Georgicetus volcatensis, discovered in the Lower Eocene Bluff Formation in Burke County, Georgia. Georgicetus is one of the oldest known whales, I believe, discovered in the United States. And this is a four-legged whale. And it doesn't look like a whale at all, but our understanding of whale evolution has changed our understanding of how whales would have evolved due to animals living on land to animals transitioning and going into the water. And Georgicetus definitely shows that ancient evolution of animals living on land to animals transitioning and going into water. So this is a perfect example of evolution at its finest. Eocene also included a variety of different types of vertebrate animals, such as sand dollars and mollusks. Sand dollars found in the Clint Throat Formation are very highly prized for collecting. They are very beautiful specimens, but they're also very delicate because their shells are very thin. Echinoids included Rhyncholampus from the Oligocene, from the residuum in Berkeley County, Georgia. And you also had a variety of different types of invertebrates that included things like mollusks and oysters and things of that nature. So invertebrates did very, very well in the Earth's history. The Miocene included these very large sharks, Carcharodontes megalodon, very, very famous one. We find their teeth from Savannah, Georgia, and also you can find them around the coastal plain region where there have been dredging piles. And if you're lucky, you can find a megalodon tooth. This was me at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science Paleontology collections. This tooth likely came from South Carolina or Florida, not specifically Georgia, but you can find teeth at this size in this quality from Georgia. Peccary fossils and carnivore fossils can be found in Ladd's Quarry in Cartersville, Georgia. These are Pleistocene megafauna, so things like ground sloths and other Pleistocene animals fell into a cave and died at the bottom of the cave and were discovered in Northwest Georgia. So these are Pleistocene fossils. We also have carnivorous fossils like bears, and we also have jaguars too. In fact, the jaguar jaw has been found from Ladd's Quarry. These fossils are on display at the Tellis Science Museum, so you could definitely take a look at some of the really cool carnivore material that we have on display at the Tellis Museum. And we also have large giant ground sloths that were living in the state too. This was discovered along the coastal plains. And this particular specimen is the real skull and is on display at the Fernbank Museum of Natural History in Atlanta, Georgia. Paleontology as a science is very famous, probably due to dinosaurs. And everybody knows dinosaurs, everybody loves dinosaurs, but there's so much out there that we need to understand and learn about paleontology. Paleontology is the science of understanding Earth's history, and dinosaurs are just one part of that history. Earth as a whole is about 4.5 billion years old, and there's so much to explore within that 4.5 billion years. And it is my job as an avocational paleontologist and science educator to connect with the public about our state's rich geologic history and paleontological history. Most people don't even know we have dinosaurs here. Most people don't know we have fossils here, but we do. We have a rich paleontological record. And the more we talk to the community about that, the more people can understand and appreciate what we have in the state in which we call home. I always love to talk about finding fossils and looking at the various different things that you can find in your own backyard. And that's one of the things that I love doing. Talking about fossils and bringing it to the public. This stuff is in your own backyard, and it is our jobs to educate the public about that. So I want to give thanks to the various different people for making this presentation possible. I could not have done it without you. I thank you for all the images that you have helped me with, and the opportunities of doing field work with some of these great people. And here are my sources. And I really appreciate you guys tagging along with me and coming with me on this 500 million year old journey through Georgia's geological and paleontological history. Thank you.